There is a force that moves quietly beneath the surface of human consciousness, exerting extraordinary influence without ever announcing its presence. It doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't break down doors. It doesn't need to. Instead, it settles into the mind like fog, thin, weightless, and almost impossible to detect at first. Yet, with time, it thickens, obscuring self-worth, distorting perception, and constructing invisible boundaries around the life a person believes they are allowed to live. This force is not rage, not fear, not guilt. It is something far more subtle and far more corrosive. It is shame. Shame is one of the most powerful emotional currents in human life, and paradoxically, one of the least understood. It nestles itself deep inside the psyche, often in childhood, and grows in silence, fed by misunderstanding, secrecy, and self-blame. While guilt points to an action, I did something wrong, shame targets the self, I am wrong. This shift from behavior to being is not trivial. It is a quiet psychological earthquake. Shame reshapes identity. It dictates what one believes is acceptable to show, to want, or to feel. It is the architect of countless masks, the sculptor of inhibitions, and the author of the stories people tell themselves when no one is listening. Throughout life, millions of people move through the world, carrying an internal voice that whispers, "You are not enough. You don't belong." If they truly saw you, they would turn away. This script is an invitation to examine that voice, dismantle it, and understand the structure behind it. Because shame is not an inherent truth. It is a psychological construction, and everything constructed can be deconstructed. In this philosophical exploration, we will uncover the origins of shame, understand how it infiltrates identity, examine the way it becomes a psychological surveillance system, and learn how its presence can be recognized and ultimately disarmed. If this journey resonates with you, consider joining the channel for more deep, reflective content like this. Your support makes a difference. To understand the magnitude of shame, we must first distinguish it from its neighboring emotion, guilt. These two emotional states often appear side by side, but they arise from entirely different psychological mechanisms and lead us down entirely different paths. Guilt is an emotional compass. Shame is an existential verdict. Guilt is fundamentally relational. It signals that one's behavior has violated their own values or harmed another person. It is uncomfortable, but it carries within it the seed of repair. Guilt says, "You acted against what you believe. Now you can make it right." In that sense, guilt preserves dignity. It allows a person to acknowledge a mistake while retaining a sense of inherent worth. It speaks to the capacity to grow. Shame, however, is a different phenomenon entirely. Shame does not say, "You made a mistake." It whispers, "You are the mistake." This shift transforms a moment into a self-definition. Where guilt points to behavior, shame claims ownership of identity. And because it attacks the core of who we are, shame does not encourage transformation. It encourages withdrawal. A person steeped in shame doesn't think, "How can I fix this?" They think, "I am unfixable." Shame becomes a lens that distorts every experience. A failed relationship becomes proof of unlovability. A setback at work becomes proof of incompetence. A moment of vulnerability becomes proof of weakness. This emotional distortion sets the stage for patterns that follow people for decades. Perfectionism, chronic hesitation, compulsive people-pleasing, self-isolation, and even self-sabotage. Unlike guilt, which lives in the realm of cognition, shame embeds itself in the body. It shows up in lowered eyes, in a tightened chest, in the inability to say, "I need help." Shame teaches the body to shrink, to hide, to stay small. But shame is not born from reason. It is born from experience. To understand its depth, we must trace it back to its origins. No human being enters the world with shame. Infants cry loudly, reach boldly, express freely. Authenticity is their default state. Shame is not innate, it is introduced. It begins quietly, almost invisibly, in the subtle tightening of an adult's face when a child expresses too much emotion, in the impatient sigh after a question, in the mocking comment disguised as humor, in comparisons. Why can't you be more like your brother? Why are you so sensitive? What's wrong with you? To a developing mind, these messages are not minor. A child does not analyze tone or intention. They interpret emotionally, instinctively, and absolutely. A disapproving look becomes a verdict. A moment of neglect becomes evidence. A harsh word becomes identity. And because a child's survival depends on belonging, the conclusion is almost always the same. If I want to be accepted, I must change myself. If I want to be loved, I must hide parts of me. If I want to stay safe, I must not show who I truly am. This is the birth of the false self, a survival strategy crafted to secure love and protection. The child begins to suppress what is natural in order to display what is approved. They split into two. The true self, intuitive, emotional, spontaneous, and the constructed self, carefully shaped, curated, and compliant. Philosophers and psychologists alike have described this internal divide. The true self becomes exiled, stored in the shadows of the psyche, while the false self becomes the daily performer, the negotiator with the world. The cost of this adaptation is high. The child grows, but their authentic self does not. And so, shame becomes the gatekeeper of identity, ensuring the true self remains out of sight. But shame doesn't remain confined to childhood. It evolves. It learns new tricks. It changes its voice. It becomes more efficient. Eventually, it no longer needs adults to enforce it. The child grows up, and shame grows with them, becoming internalized. As years pass and the child becomes an adult, external judgments fade into memory. But shame does not require the presence of others to do its work. It has installed itself within. The external critic becomes the internal judge. What once came from parents, teachers, or peers now echoes from inside the mind. This internal judge is relentless. It evaluates every action, every gesture, every desire with microscopic scrutiny. Don't be too loud. Don't show that emotion. Don't try that. You'll embarrass yourself. Don't take up space. Don't let anyone see the real you. The tragedy is that most people mistake this voice for conscience. But conscience guides, shame controls. Conscience teaches, shame belittles. Conscience strengthens moral alignment. Shame weakens the entire sense of self. Shame masquerades as caution, maturity, or responsibility. But beneath the disguise, it is simply fear. Fear dressed up as wisdom. And because it often speaks in familiar tones, many people never question it. They live under the belief that these self-critical thoughts are objective truths. Over time, shame becomes automated. It doesn't wait for mistakes. It anticipates them. It becomes proactive in its policing. The result is a life lived under emotional surveillance. In philosophical terms, shame is not just an emotion. It is a structure of power. It operates much like the panopticon described by Michel Foucault, an invisible tower from which one is constantly observed. In the original panopticon, prisoners never knew when they were being watched, so they behaved as if they always were. This created automatic obedience. Shame works the same way. Once internalized, shame becomes an ever-watchful gaze inside the mind. There is no need for external punishment. Self-punishment becomes the norm. This internal surveillance shapes behavior. You silence your voice before speaking. You dim your accomplishments before sharing. You shrink your dreams before pursuing. You censor your laughter, your desires, your vulnerability. You become both the prisoner and the warden. This chronic self-monitoring exhausts emotional energy and drains creativity, connection, and authenticity. Even when no one is judging you, shame makes you feel exposed. Even in solitude, shame makes you feel observed. Even in safe relationships, shame whispers that your truth is dangerous. This is why shame is so effective. It doesn't need to be triggered externally. It is self-sustaining. And as long as it remains unchallenged, it shapes your decisions, relationships, ambitions, and emotional landscape without your awareness. But to break this cycle, one must learn to see shame clearly, and that requires learning to identify its disguises. Shame rarely announces itself by name. It prefers camouflage. It slips into everyday sentences, thoughts, and behaviors that seem ordinary, but reveal deeper wounds. One of the most obvious places shame hides is language. Shame speaks in absolutes. I'm such an idiot. I'm always messing things up. Why am I like this? No one would want someone like me. I ruin everything. These statements are not about actions. They are about identity. Anytime a struggle becomes a self-definition, shame is speaking. Shame also reveals itself through avoidance. It pushes people away from experiences where their inner world could be seen. Avoidance might look like staying silent in conversations, withdrawing from relationships, declining opportunities, excusing oneself from social events, avoiding creative expression, avoiding being photographed, avoiding asking for help, avoiding vulnerability of any kind. Not because the person lacks skill, but because they fear exposure. Shame also fuels self-sabotaging cycles, starting projects and abandoning them, hiding achievements, procrastinating out of fear of judgment, or striving for perfection to avoid criticism. Perhaps most subtly, shame creates emotional masks. The overly agreeable persona, the overachiever, the comedian, the caretaker, the distant intellectual, all roles that protect the true self from being truly seen. When someone has lived with shame for a long time, these patterns can feel like just who I am. But they are not personality traits. They are survival strategies. And the first step to disarming shame is recognizing how deeply it has shaped the inner landscape. Shame does not simply silence people. It reshapes their entire way of being. Once internalized, it pushes individuals to develop strategies, some conscious, most unconscious, to protect themselves from the pain of being fully seen. These strategies manifest as emotional masks, psychological postures, and patterned behaviors that create an illusion of safety while simultaneously distancing the individual from their authentic self. These masks are not signs of weakness. They are, in a very real sense, ingenious survival mechanisms, creative adaptations formed by a mind attempting to navigate a world it perceives as dangerous. But while they protect, they also imprison. The more these masks solidify, the harder it becomes to distinguish the strategy from the self. Let's explore some of the most common masks shame creates and the philosophical implications behind them. 1. The mask of perfectionism. Perfectionism is often praised in modern culture, but beneath its polished surface lies a profound fear of inadequacy. The perfectionist believes, if I perform flawlessly, no one will see what's wrong with me. This is not ambition. It is self-erasure through achievement. The perfectionist is not trying to express excellence. They are attempting to outrun shame. Their life becomes a tightrope walk. No mistakes, no imperfections, no moments of being human. Any slip becomes catastrophic, not because the slip itself matters, but because it threatens to reveal the imperfect self hiding underneath. Perfectionism is not the pursuit of greatness. It is the avoidance of exposure. 2. The mask of the people pleaser. Another common adaptation is the compulsive need to please others. This persona is built on the belief, if everyone approves of me, Perhaps I'll finally feel worthy. People pleasers reshape themselves to fit into every situation. They agree when they want to disagree. They smile when they want to withdraw. They offer help even when they are exhausted. Their generosity is not always a gift. It is often a currency used to purchase acceptance. But this strategy has a devastating consequence. By constantly managing others' perceptions, people pleasers lose their own. Over time, they forget their preferences, values, and desires. The mask becomes so familiar that they mistake it for identity. 3. The mask of emotional detachment. Some people respond to shame not by performing or pleasing, but by retreating. They learn early that vulnerability invites criticism or abandonment, so they shut down emotionally. This mask whispers, "If I don't feel deeply, I cannot be hurt deeply." Detachment feels safe, but it robs life of connection. It numbs joy, belonging, intimacy, and even personal ambition. These individuals may appear calm, stoic, or independent, but beneath the surface lies a heart that learned to hide long ago. Philosophically, this mask reflects an existential withdrawal, an escape from the unpredictability of human attachment. 4. The mask of humor and deflection. Another strategy is humor, not as an expression of joy, but as armor. If I make them laugh, they won't see me. Behind the jokes, the quick wit, the exaggerated stories, there is often a deep fear of being truly perceived. Humor becomes a way to direct attention away from vulnerability. It keeps conversations surface level, safe, controlled. The philosophical paradox here is striking. The person who makes everyone laugh is often the one who feels most alone. Laughter becomes a shield, a way to escape real intimacy under the guise of being social and open. 5. The mask of competence. Some individuals respond to shame by becoming exceptionally capable, reliable, and composed. They master every task, take responsibility for every situation, and never show weakness. Their inner narrative is, "If I am indispensable, no one will reject me." On the outside, they appear confident. On the inside, they are terrified of failing even once. Competence becomes a full-time performance. The person becomes so busy supporting others that they never pause long enough to ask, "Who supports me?" Their worth becomes tied to utility, not identity. 6. The mask of hyper-individualism. In a world that often glorifies independence, shame can disguise itself as self-sufficiency. The hyper-independent person believes, "I can't rely on anyone. If I do, they'll see my flaws." This mask looks strong, but it is held together by fear. It prevents deep relationships, blocks vulnerability, and fractures community. To need others, even in healthy ways, feels like a threat. So the person builds a fortress around themselves, mistaking isolation for strength. But no fortress is truly safe. It keeps danger out, but it also keeps love out. Why these masks exist? These masks persist because shame convinces people that their authentic self is unacceptable. So instead, they offer the world curated versions of themselves. The philosopher Kierkegaard spoke of the self that is lost in the crowd, the self that was never allowed to be. These masks represent that loss. They are the distancing of a person from their essence. But a mask can only protect when the person believes they need protecting. And the deeper tragedy is that the person wearing the mask forgets where the mask ends and where their true self begins. Shame does not live solely in the mind. It resides in the body, in posture, in muscle tension, in breath, and in movement. Unlike guilt, which is primarily cognitive, shame leaves somatic imprints. 1. The body shrinks. People overcome by shame often physically contract. Shoulders hunch, chin lowers, chest tightens. This posture is ancient, a mammalian submission response. It communicates, "I am not a threat. Please don't hurt me." Over time, this becomes habitual, forming the body's default shape. 2. Shame disrupts breath. Breathing becomes shallow, rapid, or held. Shame constricts the diaphragm, limiting the natural flow of inhalation. The body learns to hold itself tightly, as if revealing too much, even through breath, would be dangerous. 3. Shame creates hypervigilance. The nervous system becomes alert, scanning for signs of rejection. Muscles tighten, the jaw clenches, the eyes avert. The person lives in a low-level fight-or-flight state. This hypervigilance is exhausting. It drains vitality, prevents rest, and reinforces the belief that the world is unsafe. 4. Shame disconnects us from pleasure. Pleasure, whether creative, emotional, or physical, requires openness. It requires receptivity. But shame teaches the body to close. People may struggle to receive compliments, enjoy achievements, or feel joy without guilt. Pleasure feels undeserved, and what feels undeserved is eventually avoided. Philosophically, this disconnect from pleasure signals a disconnect from the fullness of being itself. Shame is not merely psychological, it is philosophical. It speaks to questions of identity, existence, social belonging, and moral value. 1. The existential lens. Who am I allowed to be? Existential philosophers have long argued that human beings wrestle with authenticity. Heidegger called it being toward self. Sartre called it bad faith, the denial of one's freedom and true self. Shame is a prime catalyst of inauthenticity. It tells the individual that the real self is unacceptable, so they live lives shaped by expectation rather than essence. This leads to existential despair, the feeling of being alive, but not truly living. 2. The social lens. Shame as cultural control. Sociologists and philosophers note that shame functions as a tool of social conditioning. It teaches individuals which emotions, desires, and identities are permissible within their culture. Every society has rules, spoken or unspoken, about what is considered acceptable. Shame enforces these rules without needing external punishment. In this sense, shame is both psychological and political. 3. The moral lens. Shame versus conscience. Morality requires reflection, empathy, and accountability. Shame bypasses these and jumps straight to self-condemnation. Where conscience says, "You can grow," shame says, "You are intrinsically flawed." This is why shame undermines genuine morality, because it attacks the moral agent instead of the action. 4. The relational lens. Shame and belonging. Shame threatens the very roots of human connection. Humans are inherently relational beings. We exist in webs of meaning and shared experience. But shame isolates. It tells people to hide the very parts of themselves that most need compassion. This creates loneliness, not because others reject us, but because we reject ourselves preemptively. Although this video is focused on understanding shame, it's important to envision what stands on the other side of it. When shame loosens its grip, something remarkable happens. The body relaxes, the mind opens, desires emerge, creativity flourishes, relationships deepen, life expands. The world does not become perfect, but it becomes livable, breathable, and meaningful. What appears on the other side of shame is not arrogance or selfishness. It is authenticity. It is presence. It is being. To move toward that freedom, one must first learn to recognize shame, then understand it, and ultimately challenge the authority it claims to have. And that journey begins with the simple acknowledgement: shame is not who I am. It is something I learned, and what is learned can be unlearned. We have explored the anatomy of shame, its origins, its mechanisms, and its internal architecture. But understanding shame is only the beginning. In the next chapter of this journey, we will uncover how to dismantle shame, how to challenge the internal judge, how to reconnect with the true self, how to reclaim identity from the grip of emotional surveillance, how to cultivate self-worth that does not depend on performance or approval. Shame is not a life sentence. It is a psychological habit, and habits can be broken. If this exploration resonated with you, consider subscribing. Your presence helps this space grow, and together, we can build a community dedicated to inner freedom, self-understanding, and philosophical depth. Thank you for watching, for thinking, and for being willing to look inward. See you in the next video.